Hi everybody, welcome to Talon Talks. My name is Mia. In this episode, we are going to be talking about women. I have
Eddie Landeros. I am a part of the Talon.
And Gianluca Kitseiko. I'm part of the Talon too, Vice President.
All right, so to get us started off, if you two could please just say a woman, past, present, that you think is influential.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. So I personally absolutely love Greta Thunberg because she has been the face of climate activism for quite a while now. She's also a young voice too, which is something good to see. You know, I'm 19 too, so it's like, oh, that's great. I just think her work is terrific, especially because I find climate change to be very daunting, and she's taken it very seriously. She's raised a lot of money off of her foundation to fight climate change, and she is always holding like some kind of protest to like block Swedish parliament.
I like Greta too. I think it's just amazing the work she's done. Yeah, it's great. My influence is also Greta Gerwig. I really love her as a director. When I watched Lady Bird, I mean, like, it was very touching and emotional. And then she went on to do Barbie. She was able to put a platform on for Margot Robbie, for Billie Eilish, for all the women involved. And I think that speaks volumes.
Your guys' answers were great. And actually, we do cover some things that you guys are talking about. So the first woman that we have up on the list to go over is, like Eddie mentioned, Greta Gerwig, an award-winning director who has directed, as Eddie said, Lady Bird and the Barbie movie are two. Also, I'm fairly sure she did Little Women as well.
Yeah, she did.
So it's really, really prominent movies. And she really, through these movies, have shown sort of what it means to be a woman, even though, I mean, of course, nobody's Barbie. Of course, every story is very specific, and Little Women, that time has passed. She still does a really, really good job of representing what it does mean to be a woman and what that experience is like, even when it was 100 or so years ago. She's just really making waves as a female director, because you also don't see a lot of those either.
I haven't watched a lot of her movies besides the Barbie movie, and I absolutely loved Lady Bird. I thought it was very touching, and even though I watched it with my 11-year-old sister, which I was like, oh, there's a couple of scenes in there that I was like, oh, but she enjoyed it a lot because I think it kind of like relates to her in a bit, you know, especially as the movie is supposed to be like a girl growing into an adult. So, but other than that, I absolutely loved her directing style, you know, especially in Barbie. I know that there's a lot of guys out there who didn't like Barbie that much. And also, well, I will say there's also a lot of women who didn't like it either. But I personally enjoyed that movie. I thought it was fun.
Yeah. And I'd like to ask Mia too, just about the Barbie movie. Because when it came out, you know, obviously, like, there's a lot of men who were sensitive to it. They felt, you know, like they're just Ken, blah, blah, blah. And then I think even some women too were, you know, depending on the group, just weren't impressed by Barbie because it just didn't seem like it was meant for them. Do you have anything to say on that?
Personally, I wasn't that impressed by it. I think the things that they showed were real. I think they were relevant. I just don't think it really... Personally, it just kind of felt more like it was putting a magnifying glass on the situation. I didn't feel like it was adding or changing anything to it. With Lady Bird, you see her go through these specific obstacles, and you see her go through all of these very niche things that somehow everybody can relate to, whereas with the Barbie movie, it just felt very streamlined and basic, which did make it relatable. I just wish there would have been a little bit more added to the story. It just felt like it really didn't do what I hoped it sort of would have done, with adding to the narrative, with spinning it, with things like that.
I think it's interesting you say that because, I mean, if I was to pick a movie for movie night, depending on the group, because, like, obviously Barbie is, like, everyone's crowd favorite, but for me, it would be Lady Bird because of those reasons. It felt like it was more raw, it was more real. I feel like, you know, the status that Greta got from her directing and from her acting, and to be able to hone in on this Barbie movie was a blessing and a curse, because she's heading, you know, Barbie, like the ideal woman, quote unquote. But since it is Hollywood, I feel like there's a lot of compromises she might have had to make, or she had to dance a lot with that idea in that film, Whereas Lady Bird, it was all her creative expression, I would say.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Barbie is almost like a product placement. So
Right.
she had probably had to go through a lot of limitations and a lot of things that she probably couldn't even have put in the movie because, what was it? Hasbro, right? That's the,
Yeah.
Hasbro kit. Said,
Or Mattel.
Oh, Mattel,
Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah, Mattel said, "Oh, we don't want to do that. We want to favor this group, right?"
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And so with that, I mean, the limitations, I think it kind of speaks to women in that sense, where she still has to work within that idea of Barbie, that idea of women.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
And speaking of Barbie, the next person we have on the list is Margot Robbie. Now, not because of the Barbie movie, but she actually owns a production company called Lucky Chap Entertainment that specifically specializes in promoting female stories from female storytellers. Which, I mean, women in any industry, it can be a struggle, but especially in film, we see it time and time and again that there's always something new coming out or some new case, some new horrible incident that's happened. So, or just overall just being oppressed and silenced. So her owning Lucky Chap Entertainment and having that be the main goal of this company is really, really noteworthy and really important. Overall, also, she is a supporter of equality, women's rights, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and she's just overall human.
Yeah, honestly, I never even knew this about Margot Robbie, but it's honestly really, really great because, most directors, like at least famous directors, right, big names, are men. And I'm not even gonna lie, I actually cannot even say on the top of my head besides Gerwig, another female director, because I just don't know.
Yeah, they're not as spotlighted.
Yeah.
As much. Yeah. Yeah, and I think even with Margot, the roles she's played have been so various. I mean, she's a great actress, and I feel like a lot of times she's treated as a pretty face when it comes to just her as a person. I mean, she is the Barbie. She was like the perfect cast for that role, but she's also played Harley Quinn. She's also played like a bunch of diverse roles in her career. The Wolf of Wall Street, which was, I feel like, a very impressive role to play because she had to be that woman that stood out, that was not like all the other women in that movie that Leonardo DiCaprio was hooking up with. You know, she was like a tried and true woman. So yeah, definitely just a brilliant actress, and I feel just diverse in her ways.
No, definitely. And since we're on the topic of entertainment, somebody else that's really notable to bring up is Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift and Margot Robbie, I feel like everywhere their names, like you cannot go anywhere without hearing their names or seeing their face or hearing they're everywhere. Taylor Swift specifically, though, I want to get into her because 2023 was a monumental year for her. The Eras Tour was hugely successful with there being a film in theaters, and now, as of a few days ago, that film was put on Disney Plus, which is a streaming service. And on top of that, she was Times Person of the Year. And a lot of people had a lot of different things to say about that because in the past, it's been politicians, it's been engineers, it's been software developers, it's been everybody that is much more business related, whereas Taylor Swift is creative, she's emotional, she's passionate, she definitely does not follow the basic rules or standards that Times Person of the Year has followed in the past, whether that's been purposeful or not. So with her being Times Person of the Year, just to get into a little bit about that, on top of that, she's also really impacted the music industry with her claiming back her royalties through remaking the music and standing up against artists who haven't been paid fairly or things like that. So what do you guys think about her?
Well, I got mixed feelings with Taylor Swift because I do think that she's been very powerful in the music world, and even now at a point it's like almost in a political sense, and I applaud that. Don't get me wrong, like I applaud her being able to be in the conversation when it comes to sports, being in the conversation when it comes to politics, and in announcing her album at the Grammys. I think that was pretty wild. So I'm looking forward to see what she does with that project. But there are some things like her private jet use and emissions. Was that what you're thinking, John?
I was thinking about that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of any of that. I think she could probably take a flight that's at least with some other people, you know.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be so bad if she wasn't in that top list, but she's like number one, and that's like compared to like Jeff Bezos and all that. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good that she does, and maybe that outweighs that. But I just kind of wanted to redirect that question to you, Mia, because seeing a woman like that, and even just like us saying like, oh, like her emissions, like we're putting her in a box as a woman, like how does that make you feel?
It's valid. I mean, her using her plane a lot really doesn't have anything to do with her being a woman or with her success or with her anything like that. I don't like it as much as you guys do either. But it doesn't have anything to do with her being a woman. So when thinking about, the feminist part of my brain kind of separates her from that. But then when I go into the more environmental side of my brain, it's like, okay, Taylor Swift has to kind of get it together a little bit. Like,
gotcha. But that's a good point.
Yeah, it's just environmentally, no, but feminist wise, she's made waves, definitely.
Yeah, I will say that like the most impressive thing from Taylor for me is the royalties, because when she made a stand with Spotify and Apple Music that she wasn't going to get paid this certain amount, she wouldn't stream her music unless she got her royalties. It made change for artists, and that like impacted the music industry as a whole, because it was like artists were getting trapped. So I do applaud her for that. Cool.
I'm just gonna say that I don't know a lot about Taylor Swift other than I absolutely love her music. Like, I'm just gonna put this out there. Me and my sister listen to her all the time when I'm in the car. But I just know some of the things about like how a lot of people dislike her because of very little reasons. Like, for example, just happen to be a popular artist who's at the Super Bowl. So of course she's going to get a lot of attention. Even then, when I saw the Super Bowl, I was like, this is not even that much attention. I was kind of surprised by how much they like put that up there. Mm-hmm. And I think that wouldn't be a problem if it weren't for the fact that she is a woman.
Right.
And I see that like they pan that camera to men and other people, right? But no, because it's Taylor Swift.
Right.
She's taking up the show, right? But other than that, I don't really know her feminist work per se. Like, I can understand how people see her music as feminism, and I've seen some of her work. Well, I've heard some of her work where I could be like, oh. But other than that, I don't really recognize. So do you have anything to say about that?
I do have something to kind of say about the football aspect of what you just said. Football is a mainly male-dominated fan base. So Taylor Swift showing up to a football game, and then the NFL totally capitalizing off of it and constantly showing her and being like, guess who's here? Guess who she's dating? Oh my gosh, are they engaged yet? Oh my gosh. It's just, it kind of, I understand the NFL is just kind of doing what they do to make money, to make the best out of whatever situation, even though this isn't a bad situation. They're just trying to make it the best for them. It's kind of icky, because even when she doesn't want to be shown, even at one point they showed her and people were booing and she like yelled. She was like, "Don't show me then." Like she, it just kind of goes to show, I think, how we could even talk about not males in general, because I'm not like a man hater. Like that's not what this is about. But how we're just kind of like using her for personal gain, for financial gain, for more of an audience. And it's just kind of interesting that something with a male attention or a male fan base is doing that to a woman who has more of a female fan base, and how angry these men are getting over this woman who has such a female fan base, and also how angry they're getting over these women who like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good point. Because Taylor doesn't really have a choice in the matter. Like, I mean, you could argue, um, she shouldn't go to the game or whatever, but it's like she's supporting her boyfriend.
Exactly.
She's a person that is just attending the game. Like, yeah. So, I mean, she's out of control of what they want to capitalize on.
Yeah,
so, very good point.
she's more than just an artist. She's also a person who likes to enjoy things like watching her boyfriend play football.
Yeah.
So
Let's continue with sports since we're on the subject, if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
So now somebody who, now women in sports, usually you hear that and there's crickets. You can't really think of anybody. There's not a whole lot. Recently, though, Caitlin Clark has been coming up. However, there is somebody else specifically that I really want to put a spotlight on. And that is a head coach of the University of Southern California women's basketball team, Dawn Staley. She, as a former player, she is a 6-time WNBA All-Star and a member of the Basketball and Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and she's considered one of the greatest point guards of all time. As a coach, her team has won 2 national titles, 8 Southeastern Conference titles as well. She fights for diversity and inclusion in sports, advocates for social justice, and speaks out against racism and sexism.
Mhm.
Now, her being in sports, which is, as previously talked about, definitely football, basketball, anything. It's definitely more of a male-dominated league, and any women that do it are scoffed at or just not paid attention to at all. So her going out and being as influential with not only how good of a player she is, but also with her activism and what she has done for women in basketball in general is really, really admirable, and definitely needs a spotlight put on it more than I feel it already has been, which personally, until researching this, I had no idea who she was. And hearing about everything amazing that she's done, it's surprising that you don't hear about her more often. What do you guys think?
Oh, so I'm just going to be honest. I don't actually know sports at all, so I don't have a lot to add about this. But I do know that there's been a lot of women players who've been recently getting some spotlight, which is pretty good, like Angel Reese and, like you said, Caitlin Clark, which I think she just broke a record recently. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you guys know what that was again? I remember we talked about it in the Talon Discord too.
Yeah, it's going to be in our article because we did have a submission for that. So
Mhm.
you could probably read it there. But yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of standout women in sports. We just recently had our first Afro-Indigenous woman in the soccer, I believe.
I did not know that.
Again, don't quote me on that, but I know that, again, women have been prominent in sports lately. And yeah, they're not as heard of or not as spotlighted because sports is mainly male dominated. Like when you look at speakers, how many women are in a discussion panel? Probably just one. And usually I feel like I've seen women have a lot to say in sports, but I don't think they give them the spotlight in that discussion as much as they should. Because again, there's one against like 6 other men. So yeah, I think it's important.
And I think the problem with how it's just organized is part of the reason why, because you got like NBA, then WNBA, right? So of course, like some people may see this just as an extension of it, and a lot of people do that actually. A lot of people I know actually. So they don't take it as seriously because they just think it's some kind of, well, as I said, just some extension,
Now to kind of touch back a little bit on people who have made environmental impacts, I would like to talk about Greta Thunberg. She is a young face of environmental activism. She's the younger person to ever receive Person of the Year, which she received in 2019. She's on Forbes' 100 Most Powerful Women's list. She has been in a lot of trouble from her protests, but she is a huge, huge, huge face for environmental activism. She funded the Greta Thunberg Foundation, and they have funded €1,235,000 to missions that combat climate change.
I agree. She is literally the face of climate activism right now. I just love that she's a humanitarian because I wholeheartedly support anyone who wants to save the people of Gaza. And her foundation, now that I have the statistics over here, she has funded 1,235,000 in euros. I don't know how much that is in US dollars, but it better be a lot to combat climate change. That's pretty great. As I said, I'm a young person. I'm going to see climate change affect my life a lot. So,
And she's your age?
yeah, she is quite literally my age, 19.
And on top of that, too, Gianluca, you said earlier that she's that she's also autistic while doing all of this, too,
Yeah.
right?
So that's another thing, actually. So I think that's pretty cool that the face of the face of climate activism is someone who happens to also be autistic.
Yeah.
So we got some representation right there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Very cool.
Mhm.
So, and then quick side note, Mia, how do you think a conversation between Greta and Taylor would go?
Heated.
Heated.
Definitely heated. See, the tough part about Taylor Swift too, though, is that she is a global superstar. Like, she can't go anywhere without there at least being like a little mob made.
Yeah.
So I do understand why she flies privately so much,
Yeah.
because she can't. At this point, I mean, not to say she's not a person, but she's not like a regular person.
Wow.
She's like this global.
She's Taylor
figure.
Swift.
She
Yeah.
is.
It's hard to
she's-
imagine a time where Taylor wasn't a global
Exactly.
phenomenon.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like Elvis. Like how Elvis just seemed like larger than life. That's like kind of how she seems.
Yeah.
So I do understand why she does take private jets everywhere. I do understand why she does that. I mean, it doesn't make it okay, but it is understood.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot we don't see behind the
Yeah.
cameras. And that's the same thing for Greta as well.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's a lot probably she does that we don't even get to see. And at the end of the day, like, I mean, between activism and all that, she's still going to school. Like, she's still becoming educated and living her life. Like,
Yep.
so that's pretty wild.
No, I definitely see where you're coming from, but I do believe that there are definitely options to. I mean, of course, celebrity status is a lot, especially for Taylor Swift, number one artist in Spotify. But I think there are definitely ways to make it so that you're not wasting it for like a mile.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to our next. And we're still in the realm of activism, correct?
yes, we are. And our next person we have to talk about today is Malala. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I believe it's Yousafzai. Malala Yousafzai, I believe, but it's definitely Malala. She personally, for me, I've kind of seen her or heard her or had her kind of everywhere. I can't really explain why. She's always just been kind of around. Just like magazines, books, things like that. But what she does is she is an overall feminist rights activist, and she fights for women's and girls' education rights. In 2012, she was shot in the head by the Taliban for breaking a rule that girls weren't able to get an education. She was on her way home from school, and they shot her in the head. Since then, she's been advocating for girls in Pakistan to be able to get an education, which is extremely important, especially with how strict and how scary it is over there. It's extremely, it's amazing that she's doing that. She made the Who We Are fund that focuses on gender equality, and some recent things that they've done is they are taking on gender apartheid
Yeah.
in Afghanistan, financing girls' education in Africa, and overall making sure girls are not left behind or underfunded when the boys/women are funded and are not left behind.
Wow.
So what do you guys have? What do you guys think? What do you guys have to say about her? What do you know about her?
I honestly, I don't know anything about Malala. I had to have heard the name before. I had to have seen her in the news before.
Yeah, so I've actually seen one of her speeches. Well, not actually seen it. I mean, I've heard one of their speeches, off of YouTube. It was for communications class. But learning more about this today, I would say that it's honestly great what she is doing, especially because there is other problems out there in the world that is beyond just Europe and United States. And so for someone to be out there like her, who is in what was this again? like Afghanistan, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Afghanistan. That's absolutely admirable, and I just I don't know what else to say. Just that, yeah, it's admirable, and will definitely be inspiring. Well, actually, no, she has inspired people. That's why people always like refer back to her speeches. That's why my professor did it too.
Yeah, we had the Global Citizen Club. They actually had a panel where they interviewed an author who's from Afghanistan, and she came to America. But she talked about the gender apartheid. She talked about the military presence there as well. So yeah, I mean, it very different lifestyle, very different perspective.
No, absolutely. She's just really influential, and it's really inspiring to see what she's doing over in the Middle East, especially when considering how women and girls, 'cause she's also advocating for girls. It's for girls' education rights.
Definitely.
And it's just amazing to see that, because that's not really how that is over there, at least anymore.
That leads us into our next subject, which is
Bisan
Yes.
Auda.
Which is Bisan Auda. She is a social media reporter of the Palestine and Israel conflict currently happening. She has documented the atrocities in Gaza, selfless activist who updates viewers on the situation of Gaza. Recently, the North has been dangerously low in food supplies. So definitely somebody very, very brave who would go to a place of just war and destruction right now, documenting what is happening for other people to be informed, to be aware. It's just really, really notable that she would put herself in that kind of danger, specifically to make a point to show real raw footage to the people, like in America, like in Europe, who have privileges that maybe aren't, that are not afforded other places. So really, really just an amazing person.
Amazing reporter too.
Yeah.
You know, in 2012, well, granted, I was a kid back then, so I didn't really care about anything that had to do with like foreign relations. Social media was the reason why I even got introduced to the Palestine-Israel conflict. Because before then, I didn't really understand it. I just thought it was like just a battle between two historically marginalized groups in America, so I didn't want to like touch on it. But then I stumbled upon Bisan Auda, who has documented a lot about it, and that's when I started caring about the conflict, because of people like her who are quite literally in the face of the war. So I absolutely love like everything she does. She is absolutely selfless. Just the other day, like you said, the North has been really dangerously low on food supplies, and there's actually been videos of people unfortunately starving to death. And so while filming a video where there's like a new supply of food for the South, I think, the South where she's at, so not as in rubble as the North. She made a video saying that we don't need this food. We have plenty of food. The North needs it more, and I absolutely commend that. So, but you know a little bit about her too, right?
Yeah, I follow her on Instagram. She's one of the accounts I started following because of her Gaza coverage, along with Motaz Aziza and Plesia Alakad, who they're both journalists, and I believe that Motaz and Bisan have worked together on occasions. But her photos are incredible. I'm a photographer, and just to see that coverage, it tells a story. But also, like, even just being her exposed to that, and having to, like, as a photographer, like, you need to go in there and get that coverage, whether you like it or not. And that's difficult to do as it is, because it's your own people that are suffering. So I really applaud that, and I continue to follow it. It's very sad to see, but it's nice to see now. At this point, there's at least some recognition for the hardworking journalists out there after so long. I think, going over these, like, we cover like sports, entertainment. We also covered activism and the environment. I think it speaks a lot for where we're at with women in this generation. it's definitely not an equal footing as it is for men, but the diversity in who we are able to just talk about within the segment is very, very, it's very wild, compared to like 10, 20 years ago, when you might just have a whole list of celebrity women that, might have like a fundraiser they've started or something like that, but they just weren't as well known as these activists have been and just brought the attention, whether it's because of the internet that we're exposed to now or because that's just the state of our world right now. And I think it's more of the latter.
Mm-hmm.
So
I definitely agree that at this point, and I think it's going to take little while until we can say that we value women and men like just as equally.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like seeing some or just hearing about some of these people really puts into perspective of how past activism has really helped give these people like past feminists, the movements have really given these people like a platform.
I want to take this time to ask our women influence in the room right now, which is Mia. She's one of our journalists with the Talon, great writer. I kind of want to hear why you wanted to be a journalist.
Just to advocate for change, to put the spotlight on important details that may not be as talked about or as important, or put the spotlight on people that may not be as talked about or as important. I'm not saying this to put myself on a high horse, in a pedestal. I knew about Malala when this happened. I was in second grade, and my teacher told us about it. And since then, I've been kind of following through with her story a little bit. And she's also just been kind of really inspiring to me as well, just because of all that she does, it's like she's dealing with all of this, but yet she still pushes forward and she still goes through and she still achieves what she wants to achieve. And that was just really, really inspiring because she put a spotlight on a horrible situation that really doesn't get talked about too much, or if it does, it's very stereotyped and very little is discussed about it. And that's sort of and she's putting the spotlight on it. She's changing it. She's going against all odds and is doing it. Literally against all odds. She got shot in the head. And that's what really, really inspired me to be a journalist, was because putting the spotlight on issues that aren't as talked about, talking about, or just finally bringing things into the conversation, finally talking about the ugly, the scary, the bad, but making it because people need to know about it. Change comes in masses, and if the mass is properly informed about a bad situation, then change can actually be made.
Beyond that too is like for men like me and Gianluca, is that we're still we're supporters, we're allies in when it comes to feminism. We're feminists ourselves, but obviously we don't know like the first thing about being in a woman's shoes. There's a long way for us to go as well. So as men that want to just see progress being made, whether that's for women, for humanity as a whole, what can we do?
Just be aware. just be aware, because the thing about it too is that what I've seen now, like I said, I'm not a man hater. I'm not man bashing. I'm not saying, like I'm not at all.
Yeah.
Men don't realize the impact they have sometimes.
Yeah.
And that is just the main thing. Not put yourself in a woman's shoes, but just put yourself in somebody else's position and be like, okay, if I was in this position, I couldn't do this, and this person was acting this way toward me. How would I feel about that? And then just act with that in mind.
A little while ago, we were talking about podcasts too, because I think the most well-known podcast is Joe Rogan, which is like stereotypical male talk, and it's just it's not something I really listen to, but I know I have a lot of friends who listen to Joe Rogan because like they just regurgitate it. And I feel like it not only sets a precedence for like podcasting as a whole, but it sets a precedence for men, and like the alpha types. So
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Oh no, I just love like that you mentioned like the alpha types and whatnot, because that's kind of like just the toxic masculinity of like today, right? That's what they want to label it as.
Yeah.
But I want to just say that I don't think like, well, actually I don't see it. I don't see how men see how feminism positively impacts them, and more sees feminism as a negative, just something absolutely negative. Because I believe that feminism is the inclusion of all. So that'd be like what I'm just gonna regurgitate this one thing I've been telling you guys, but I feel like it's the easiest example I could give to you guys. Like we were just talking about the NBA and the WNBA, and I told you guys how those two are kind of one like those two because they're separated and because one is like has like an extra letter on it, making it sound like this is its own. This is like an extension of the main thing. Then people automatically are like, oh, this is the one we want to watch, the men, right?
Right.
But I think like in a feminist way of putting this together, it would be, let's just say, based on weight class. So people will say, oh, well, I mean, like women and men, like women are significantly weaker than men, right? Like you can't put like a 5-foot woman on a 6'7" man. So, but if we do it on weight, not only are women involved and men involved because they have equal chances against each other, but also a lot of men like me, for example. I'm not 6 foot. I can never play on the NBA.
Yeah.
So that gives me a chance at going to the NBA, which I'm not planning on going to the NBA. But it's just, that's how I view it, just the inclusion of all. Anyways, but
yeah, no,
I think more men just have to realize that, and instead of thinking about it like, oh, this is just for women, and that, like, oh, these are just women issues, and not, because I think it's just as much as a man's issue as it is for a woman.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to me, his point too is just that we, like men, we do have the power to help facilitate that change if we choose to, especially in the area like sports, where, I mean, Taylor Swift was a spotlight this year. So, and hopefully we can help facilitate those changes to make more positive impacts when it comes to women. So, yeah.
No. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. I didn't really have anything to.
Yeah. So, I guess last question I have for you, Mia, is what do you look forward to in the future?
Personally, this is kind of strange, especially because I'm not a big sports fan. I'm excited to see more women represented in sports because you have Caitlin Clark, you have Angel Reese, you have Dawn Staley. You don't hear anything about women in sports. Like I played sports. I played the girls lacrosse for a long time, and every single person I talked to was like, "Oh, well, that's not a real sport."
Wow.
Like guys lacrosse, it would get so mad. It would get so mad. Like it was completely completely discounted. Like by everybody I talked to, it's like, okay, well, you can't do this. That's not a real sport. And it's like, do you want to really? Like it would, so it's crazy, but that's just is what I'm really looking forward to, is seeing more women represented in more male dominated areas like sports. But then again, I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, because you see what happened with Taylor Swift, and there were like riots over that and people and boycotts. So, I definitely look forward to seeing, I think there is growth, and I think there is growth to be had. There is still, feminism is still growing. There is still growth to be had. But I'm excited to see more of sports part of it. Now, I do actually have a question to ask you guys too. So with the podcasts that you guys mentioned about all the alpha and the Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate and stuff, what do you guys as men think about that?
I don't care for it. I've always been an observer, and my family, like, I have a big Mexican family, and mostly women. So like it was more of a matriarchy. My grandma ran a lot of the house, and then she had 8 kids. 5 of them were women, and then 3 of them were men. So a lot of female activity there, and I think it was just always instilled that you were supposed to listen to your elders, and then especially to women. And with the whole Joe Rogan or like Howard Stern, like all of these like talk show hosts that are creating this image for men, I mean, it'd be like, I don't know, if say the Barbie movie. Like if the Barbie movie was like literally just like about Barbie being perfect and like you have to uphold these beauty
Yeah.
standards as a woman and stuff like that, you wouldn't agree with it, you know? Like I wouldn't feel comfortable as a woman with that. So I don't feel as comfortable with the men like feeling like you gotta have all this testosterone or like you can't have a realistic conversation. So well, what about you, John?
Oh, I just find this podcast to be so funny because it's just what is it? I remember there's this one I saw. It was like 4 guys, and I already told you guys about this. Like 4 guys, and then like I think it was like one preacher, and I think it was like just 2 other women that they just wanted like have like a chat about, and they started talking about different things, and I think one of them, I can't really remember the subject, but all I know is that the preacher, all he did was just talk about Christ and how like these people are sinful and I forgot to mention these 2 women aren't even like scholars in this field or any of any of the things they're talking about. There actually happens to be OnlyFans models, so they selectively pick someone who they just thought, oh, because they're porn actresses, they're gonna be freaking like dumb. That's what they're thinking. So obviously they selected those 2 just to make them look like fools on that podcast. Well, the men over here are like saying, oh, actually this, like actually that, this, right? This is what Christ would have done or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, like too, like because I mean these podcasts are like objectifying women and other people too, like but there's still some of the leading podcasts in the country, so it's like what does that say for our entertainment? And I feel like I have enough conversations with people like you where it's just like I don't listen to that or it's just not my cup of tea. It's very degrading, but yet they're still on top. So like why is that? Like why is it that more people that I come into contact with don't like that idea, but yet they're still so prevalent? So maybe another topic to think about.
And just one more thing, I remember that there was this one clip I saw where one of the guys were literally just justifying abuse and saying that women have to power through it, and that if a man is getting abused by his woman, he's a P word, and so I'm thinking, wow, this is really I see this is where I see like feminism as a good thing, because not only does it prevent women from being abused by men, but it also stops men from thinking, oh, if he's a man, he can't be abused, right, by his woman, right? So that's just how I see it anyways. But that's it for me. Do you have any other question?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was thank you guys for hosting this with me or for doing this with me. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening, and we'll see you at the next one.
And this has been absolutely fun, honestly. I got to learn a lot. I got to talk about my feminist views too, so that's awesome.
Cool. All right. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. I'm glad we got to do this.
Alrighty. Adios. Bye.
Bye.